The following is a presentation of Creepy AF, a Springer Podcast Network production.
Friday night football games are usually the last place you expect to feel unsafe. The stadium was packed. The smell of popcorn filled the air. The marching band echoed through the stands, and parents cheered as the home team battled under the bright stadium lights. Molly had come to watch her younger cousin play. She settled into the bleachers beside her aunt and uncle, expecting nothing more than a relaxing evening. Then she noticed him. A man, probably in his 30s, stood alone against the railing a few sections away. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't watching the game. He wasn't talking to anyone. Every time Molly happened to glance in his direction, he was already looking at her. At first, she tried to ignore it. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe he was simply staring off into space. But every few minutes, she'd look again, and his eyes were still fixed on her. The feeling became impossible to shake. She quietly mentioned it to her aunt, who glanced toward the man before shrugging it off. He's probably just people watching. Molly wanted to believe that. She turned her attention back to the game, but curiosity kept pulling her eyes toward the railing. Every single time, he was still there, still watching. As halftime approached, Molly decided to use the restroom. She told her family she'd be right back and headed beneath the bleachers toward the concourse. The crowd noise faded as she walked through the concrete hallway lined with concession stands and restrooms. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. She looked over her shoulder. Her stomach dropped. It was the same man. He wasn't running. He wasn't saying anything. He was simply following her from a distance. Trying not to panic, Molly kept walking. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he was headed the same way. To find out, she suddenly turned down a hallway that led away from the restrooms and toward another section of the stadium, a path with no real reason to take. Seconds later, the man turned too. Now she knew. He wasn't following the hallway. He was following her. Her pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone and pretended to call someone while picking up her pace. The footsteps behind her did the same. The farther she went, the quieter it became. The cheers from the football game faded into a distant roar, replaced by the echo of footsteps on cold concrete. She rounded another corner. For just a second, the footsteps stopped. Molly didn't wait to find out why. She hurried through an exit that led back into the crowded section of the stadium and immediately spotted a school security officer. Out of breath, she explained everything. The officer radioed for assistance, and within moments, several staff members began searching the concourse, restrooms, concession area, and nearby exits. Molly pointed toward the hallway where she'd last seen the man. They searched every direction. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. No one matching Molly's description could be found anywhere in or around the stadium. Her family stayed close to her for the rest of the game, but she couldn't relax. Every time she heard footsteps behind her, she found herself looking over her shoulder. When the final whistle blew, they wasted no time getting to the parking lot. Before climbing into the car, Molly scanned the crowd one last time. The man was gone. She never saw him again. She still doesn't know what he wanted. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he planned to rob her. Or maybe he was waiting for the moment she found herself completely alone. Sometimes the scariest part of a story isn't what happened. It's what almost did. Most people think they're safe in a crowded mall. With hundreds of shoppers walking around, security cameras on every corner, and employees everywhere you look, it feels like the last place anyone would expect to become the target of a complete stranger. That's exactly what Roger and Ellie thought. The couple had spent the afternoon browsing stores before deciding to stop for lunch at the food court. They grabbed Panda Express, found an empty table near the middle of the dining area, and settled in for a break. Families laughed over lunch. Kids carried shopping bags bigger than they were. The food court buzzed with conversation. Everything felt perfectly normal. Around halfway through their meal, Roger stood up. "I'm gonna run to the bathroom. I'll be right back." Ellie smiled and nodded as he disappeared into the crowd. She pulled out her phone and continued to eat. Less than a minute later, someone stopped beside her table. She looked up to see a man around her age wearing a black hoodie and a backward baseball cap. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask if the seat was taken. Instead, he looked directly at her and smiled. "Hey, I think you're really cute." Ellie forced a polite smile, hoping that would end the conversation. It didn't. The man leaned in slightly. "Wanna fuck?" The words caught her completely off guard. She stared at him for a second before quietly replying, "No, I have a boyfriend." His smile disappeared. "Oh, you've got a boyfriend." The disappointment in his voice quickly turned into irritation. "So what? You can't even have a conversation?" Ellie slid her chair back slightly. "I said no." Rather than walking away, he stepped even closer. "You girls always think you're too good for everybody." Ellie's heart started racing. She glanced toward the hallway where Roger had gone, silently hoping he'd come back soon. Almost on cue, a familiar voice interrupted. "Everything okay over here?" Roger had returned. The stranger looked him up and down before taking a slow step backward. "I was just talking to her." Roger calmly moved between the two. "Well, she answered you." For a few tense seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, the stranger smirked. "Whatever." He turned and blended into the crowd. Roger sat back down, but Ellie had lost her appetite. After telling him exactly what had happened, they decided it was time to leave. At first, everything seemed fine. They wandered through a clothing store, then a sporting goods store, making their way toward the nearest exit. That's when Roger noticed someone behind them. The same man. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't carrying any bags. He simply stayed 20 or 30 feet behind them wherever they went. Roger decided not to mention it right away. He hoped it was nothing, but after they entered another store, so did he. When they left, he left. Every turn they made, he made. Ellie finally noticed. "Roger?" "I know," he answered quietly. "He's still behind us." Neither of them panicked. Instead, they headed directly toward the closest mall exit. Just as they reached the main corridor, a voice called out behind them. "Hey!" Roger stopped. Ellie grabbed his arm. "Don't." But Roger turned around anyway. The stranger stood several feet away, wearing the same smug expression he had in the food court. "You got a problem?" the man asked. Roger took a few slow steps toward him. "My problem is that you won't leave us alone." The stranger laughed. I was just trying to talk to your girlfriend. She told you no. So that should have been the end of it. The stranger shrugged. What are you going to do about it? For a moment, nobody moved. Then, without warning, the stranger shoved Roger hard in the chest. Roger stumbled backward before immediately shoving him away. The stranger threw the first punch. It glanced off Roger's shoulder. Roger answered with one solid punch of his own, knocking the man backward into a bench. Shoppers scattered in every direction. Someone yelled for mall security. The two men grabbed each other again, struggling for only a few moments before several security officers rushed in and pulled them apart. Ellie quickly explained everything, from the unwanted advances in the food court to the stranger following them through the mall. Several nearby shoppers confirmed they watched the man trail the couple from store to store. Security immediately escorted the stranger away, while another officer stayed with Roger and Ellie. After taking their statements, the officer advised them they were free to leave. The couple didn't waste another second. They walked quickly through the parking lot, climbed into their car, locked the doors, and drove away. Only once they were several miles from the mall did either of them finally relax. They had gone there expecting nothing more than lunch and a little shopping. Instead, they found themselves being hunted by someone who couldn't accept one simple word: no. And sometimes that's all it takes for an ordinary afternoon to become something you'll never forget. Most people don't expect the creepiest part of their job to be their own manager. Ryan was 18 years old when he got hired at Wendy's. Like most teenagers, he just wanted a paycheck. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He got along with his coworkers, learned the kitchen quickly, and figured it'd be an easy place to work while he planned his future. There was only one problem: his manager. Her name was Gina. She was quite a bit older than Ryan, and almost from day one, something about her made him uncomfortable. It wasn't anything obvious at first. It was the way she'd watch him. Ryan would be dropping fries, cleaning the grill, or taking an order, and whenever he'd look up, she'd already be staring at him. Not like a manager checking on an employee. It felt different. If he caught her, she'd smile. Sometimes she'd wink. Other times she'd pretend she'd been looking somewhere else. Ryan tried brushing it off. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But as the weeks went by, the compliments started. You've got a really nice smile. You clean up pretty good. I bet all the girls are after you. Ryan would laugh awkwardly and get back to work. He wasn't interested. More importantly, she was his fucking boss. He couldn't exactly tell her to leave him alone without wondering if it'd come back to bite him. Then came his first closing shift. After the dinner rush died down, one employee after another clocked out until only Ryan and Gina were left to close the restaurant. Ryan figured it'd just be another hour or so of cleaning. Instead, it became the longest night of his life. As they cleaned, Gina barely talked about work. She kept asking if he had a girlfriend, if he was seeing anyone, if he ever dated an older woman. Ryan answered with short, uncomfortable responses and tried changing the subject every chance he got. She wasn't taking the hint. Eventually, Gina asked him to carry a few boxes into the walk-in freezer. It sounded like a normal request. Ryan picked up the boxes and followed her inside. The heavy freezer door swung shut behind them. Ryan set the boxes on the shelf and turned around. Gina was standing only a couple feet away. Way too close. Before he could even react, she grabbed the front of his shirt and tried to kiss him. Ryan shoved her backward. What the fuck are you doing? For a second, she just stared at him. Then she laughed. Oh, come on. Don't act like you haven't thought about it. Ryan couldn't believe what he was hearing. I haven't. I'm serious. Back the fuck off. Instead of apologizing, she took another step toward him. "I can make this worth your while." Ryan shook his head. "No, I'm not doing this." The smile disappeared from Gina's face. Her voice became cold. "If you won't fuck me," she paused for a moment, "I'll make sure you don't have a job here anymore." Ryan just stared at her. He honestly didn't know what to say. Was she bluffing? Maybe. But she controlled his schedule, she evaluated his performance, she had authority over him, and she just threatened to use it. Ryan didn't argue. He walked around her, shoved the freezer door open, grabbed his keys, and walked straight out of the restaurant. He didn't finish closing, he didn't clock out, he got in his car and left. That night he barely slept. Part of him kept wondering if anyone would believe him. The next morning, Ryan contacted the general manager and asked for a private meeting. He told them everything. The staring, the comments, the flirting, the attempted kiss, and finally, the threat she made inside the freezer. To the company's credit, they didn't brush him off. An investigation was opened immediately. Managers interviewed employees who had worked with both of them. Then they pulled weeks of security footage from inside the restaurant. There weren't any cameras inside the freezer, but the footage outside told a story all by itself. Again and again, Gina could be seen lingering around Ryan's station for no work-related reason. Watching him while he cleaned, finding excuses to walk past him, stopping conversations with other employees the moment Ryan entered the room. Several coworkers admitted they noticed it too. They just never realized how bad it had become. After reviewing everything, management made their decision. Gina was fired. Ryan kept his job. Looking back, Ryan says the hardest part wasn't what happened in the freezer. It was wondering if anyone would laugh it off simply because he was a man. The truth is, workplace harassment doesn't care who you are. Sometimes the predator is the person with the name tag that says manager, and sometimes the only reason they get caught is because someone finally says, "Enough is enough."